crisis room at the Planalto Palace, red lights and sirens blaring, presidential aides with pale faces, in shock. A phrase uttered by one of the men closest to President Lula echoes in the room. The Americans have already decided it's going to happen, and we need to make sure Caracas doesn't respond in kind. The clock shows December 2025, and the largest aircraft carrier on the planet is just a few hundred miles off the Venezuelan coast. Internal sources from Itamaraty and the Planalto, cited by Valor Económico on December 8, 2025, confirm it. The Brazilian government is already working with the scenario of a direct American military offensive against targets in Venezuela as something imminent and irreversible. The number one goal of Brazilian diplomacy now is no longer to prevent the action, but to convince Maduro not to respond militarily so that the operation does not escalate into a full-scale war. In plain language, Brasilia has become the messenger asking the neighbor to take the punch and not fight back. Why this radical change in stance, and why exactly now? The carrier strike group of the United States ship Gerald R. Ford, the largest aircraft carrier in the world, is operating in international waters less than 400 kilometers from La Guaira, along with 5 Arleigh Burke destroyers and 2 Ticonderoga cruisers, including Virginia-class submarines in silent mode, together with more than 90 F-35C and F-18 fighter jets on board the carrier. In the last 3 weeks, Reaper drones and Mach helicopters have destroyed at least 14 Venezuelan vessels accused of trafficking. Trump has already declared Venezuelan airspace closed on X and ordered the evacuation of all American citizens. Classic signs of a heavy military operation. The declared targets are narcotics labs in the Venezuelan interior, but South American intelligence reports indicate that these facilities are in areas controlled by the Los Soles cartel and dissident revolutionary armed forces of Colombia members, exactly the routes that supply 78% of the cocaine that reaches the United States. Caracas sees it simply. This isn't a war on drugs, it's a takeover of the corridor. And the view from the Planalto is even colder. If Maduro responds with anti-ship missiles or activates the Russian S-300s, the United States will have justification for a full ground invasion. That's why Brazil is begging him for moderation in the region. Sources close to the conversation between Trump and Lula in Malaysia and last week's phone call reveal the silent agreement. Washington removed the extra 50% tariffs on Brazilian steel and aluminum and signaled that it will suspend sanctions against Brazilian judiciary officials. In exchange, Brazil accepts the operation and commits to containing any Venezuelan reaction that could force an escalation. In other words, Brazil has become the diplomatic shield. Brazil wants to have a security one. Brazil wants a security law. Brazil wants it to stop. Brazil wants Venice to stop Contingio recycled. It was the Afro-Colombian. Guinness was discreetly threatening Roraima and Amazonas. Officially, it's an exercise to guarantee law and order, but everyone knows what it's for if there's a regime collapse or open war. Brazilian government projections estimate 4 to 6 million refugees in under 90 days. At that point, Roraima collapses in 2 weeks, and then the domino effect kicks in. French Guiana could be affected and France sends ships and fighter jets. At the same time, NATO is activated. China and Russia, which have arms and oil contracts with Maduro, might send advisors and Panzer-Wind systems to meet Maduro's demands. Suddenly, South America becomes a new Middle East, with oil, drug trafficking, and superpowers, playing chess with fire. The most striking phrase in the Valor article spoken by a high-ranking presidential advisor was this one. Our worst-case scenario isn't the American offensive. It's the American offensive turning into a prolonged occupation, because then Venezuelan oil would come to be controlled directly by the United States. Iran, already in Trump's sights, loses its main buyer of sanctioned oil, and Russia loses its last major Latin American client, for its oil. All of this with Brazil serving as a diplomatic bridge and, if necessary, as a human buffer on the border. At this very moment, the crisis clock is ticking. The United States ship, Gerald R. Ford, has just made a 180-degree turn and is now pointing its bow directly at the Venezuelan Caribbean. Maduro claims he wants peace, yet he's already put the armed forces on high alert. And Brazil, for the first time in history, is on the side of those who are going to pull the trigger. The question that remains is whether it is not. But when the first Tomahawk missiles tear through the sky over Caracas, the entire continent will only be able to watch. Or will this be the spark that no one will be able to extinguish? If you want me to keep covering this crisis in real time, leave a like and subscribe. This helps the channel bring even deeper analyses.